Let's talk about the Fujifilm X100v and everything I hate about it. In this video, I will be talking about a variety of flaws that the X100v has. But let's remember that a camera is not supposed to tick every single box of expectation from a photographer, especially not the X100v. It's a fixed lens, point and shoot, travel camera. It's different to most cameras. After about 4 or 5 months of using the Fujifilm X100v, let's talk about everything I don't like about it first. Actually holding this camera for more than a few hours isn't fun. I even bought an accessory to make the grip easier and more comfortable. I guess I can let it slide because it's not that heavy, so if I did just want to let it hang around my neck, it's not a problem. Actually holding it hands-on for a few hours, my fingers start aching, my thumb doesn't really know where to sit, because it is that classic retro camera aesthetic, which is one of the reasons people buy it. Actually using it, not very comfortable. The autofocus just isn't that good, but I do think after you understand how to use it, it's not as annoying as this may sound. For example, if you point the X100v at something that doesn't have a strong subject or contrast or detail, the focus will hunt around and it won't really know what to do with itself. Now, I have heard that on previous models of the X series, like the F and the T, it was a lot worse, and the V is definitely an upgrade on those problems, but I didn't own those cameras, so I'm jumping in with a Fujifilm X100v as a first-time Fujifilm shooter, and the autofocus isn't impressive. In reality, if you just point the single point focus at something obvious with a strong subject, contrast, any detail within the scene, it focuses on it no problem whatsoever. So I just point the camera at something that has some contrast, and then I recompose my image, and that's been totally fine. Now, I have heard good things about the auto face tracking. I just don't use it. I feel like, especially with my street photography, if I'm pointing my camera at a scene, I don't want the camera to focus on people's faces randomly. I actually want full control over what I'm focusing on, and not having face or eye tracking on, it just makes the whole process easier. Let's talk about low light right now. I don't push the camera higher than 3200, but there's obviously a difference between adding grain and getting that film vibe and adding noise, and it just ruins the image. The camera anything higher than 6400, yeah, I just don't think it looks very good. Something positive about shooting in low light is that the camera does still operate exactly the same. So the autofocus didn't seem to have any problems when I was shooting at night. The speed of the camera in general, the images came out fine. The quality, just the whole usability of the camera during low light situations is actually quite good. It's just when you have to use 6400 ISO or 3200. But saying all that, it is an APS-C camera, so we can't expect it to operate like a full-frame mirrorless flagship model you see from other brands. One of the most annoying things about this camera is that if you alter the clarity setting, if you're using a film simulation or creating a recipe or whatever you want to do, and you alter the clarity by +1 or -1, I press the shutter and it just takes 1 or 2 seconds to process the file. Now, I don't know if this is just a firmware problem and Fujifilm can give us an update. You just can't touch the clarity because it just ruins the camera, and yeah, it's basically unusable in my opinion. So my final negative point here on this video, before I start talking about everything I love about the camera, is just the battery life. And if you go out for a full day of street photography, you need at least 2, preferably 3 or 4. You could do some things in the camera to optimize the battery life, so let's quickly talk about some quick tips to help with that. Turn off pre-autofocus. You don't want the camera just continually hunting around. That will drain your battery. Turn Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off, obviously. Another one would be to make sure sleep mode is on, so if it goes idle after 15-30 seconds, the camera will just, go into hibernation. All those little things help, but I just wish the batteries were better. I wanted to just start with some negative points just so I can be honest about the camera. Everyone loves the camera, that's what it seems, so you maybe don't hear the negative side or some of the points I've mentioned in this video, so I wanted to just give you a well-rounded review as possible. The camera's not perfect and it does have some flaws, like I've mentioned. But with all that being said, the X100v is my favorite camera, so let me explain why I love it and you probably would as well. It's unapologetic about its purpose. With a lot of other cameras, you have a lot of freedom. You can shoot in any focal length, shoot in any settings, shoot in any situation, but that freedom can actually be uninspiring sometimes. I know that sounds strange, but limitations can actually make processes easier. When I use the X100v, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do with it and how I'm going to use it. and for me that's mostly street photography. When I use my Canon R6 for example, that's my workhorse for video and photo stuff. I need to decide what lens I'm going to use. I'm probably going to shoot in full manual. I also need a camera bag to accommodate it. It just comes with all this faff. This comes with zero faff. The less faff, especially with street photography, the more fun. That should be on a t-shirt or something. Less faff, more fun. The lens on the camera is also amazing. I am honestly still shocked after months of use the quality of photos that this lens produces. I'm not going to pixel peep every photo I take with this camera, but the 35mm on the X100V rivals 35mm I've used on other full-frame mirrorless flagship cameras, for example. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this isn't sold as a professional working camera, but this lens will definitely produce you professional grade images. The hybrid viewfinder is a great little feature and I find it a lot of fun to use. Now, if I just switch this little button here to the right, it changes to the electronic viewfinder, and if I switch it back, it changes to the optical viewfinder. I will try and figure out a way to film that so you can see. But I think that's lovely, and I always keep it actually in the optical viewfinder just to maintain that tactical feel so I can see the world as my eyeballs see it, and so I'm not always looking at a screen. We spend a lot of time looking at screens nowadays, and I don't want another screen in front of me. So yeah, I spend most of my time looking through the optical viewfinder, and in any tricky exposure settings or weird situations, I can just change to the electronic viewfinder to see what the final image will look like. The raw files with this camera are actually incredible. A lot of the time I'm shooting this camera a full stop overexposed, or at least 2/3 overexposed, just because I like my street photos to pop off. I want to see the detail in the shadows. With all that being said, the raw file can still handle those highlights and actually recover detail really nicely. As fun as shooting JPEGs are with this camera, which I will talk about in a second, I do shoot both RAW and JPEG just because of how cool the RAWs are to work with. So the colors in this camera give me joy, and I don't mean that to sound so cheesy, but I am just loving the colors that the X100V provides. I won't get too technical at this point because a lot of the color science related stuff just goes over my head. Now, the way our colors look in our images can come down to a lot of different reasons. Now, I use Lightroom to edit my files. Now, if I was using Capture One converts raw files differently to Lightroom. So there's these type of things we need to take into account. And if we're all shooting raw files and we're all editing differently, you could argue that Fuji colors, Canon colors, Sony colors, none of that really matters. But from personal experience, I've noticed just getting reds and yellows and oranges and greens out of this camera just seems a little bit different, seems a bit nicer than any other raw files I've used before. So I can't really get any more technical than that. I don't know the details of color science, but the colors in the X100V are very, very nice to work with. Talking about film simulations in JPEGs. Now, if you're a regular subscriber to this channel, you'll know that I love testing out different recipes, getting different film looks, and playing around with the JPEG files. And I can honestly say that testing out this little niche of film simulations and JPEGs and getting different film looks has added like a whole new game to my street photography and gives me another reason to go out and shoot. And that's the biggest thing with the X100V. It makes me want to go and take photos. Apart from looking really cool when using this camera, obviously, it's actually just really friendly. Now, especially with street photography, if I've got a regular Canon, Sony, DSLR, mirrorless camera, whatever it is, it kind of just looks intimidating, and the people around you are aware that you have a camera in your hand. If people see you shooting with this, they just don't care. It doesn't look professional. It looks like a toy. You can get closer to your subjects. People don't really seem to know or care what you're doing compared to if you have a professional camera. People just avoid it, and that makes the process of street photography a little bit more difficult. So as much as this camera makes me want to go out and take photos, it actually makes the process easier as well. Having said everything I have about this camera, I do honestly think it's overpriced still. Fixed lens, autofocus isn't great, low light's not really that good, ergonomics is weird. It's a hard sell explaining to someone why it's £1,200, but once you use it and you experience it, I think it will slowly but surely become your favorite camera, as it has mine. If you want to watch a full video about how I use it, my approach, the settings, how I've got the camera set up, all of that stuff, I've made a video all about my Fujifilm X100V workflow. So a link will pop up somewhere. Check that out if you want to know how I've got the camera set up. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out.